And welcome back to the show. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the government's 2020 vision, a groundbreaking policy that was introduced to combat the effects of overpopulation. With the end of the 10-year inception period in sight, we at the White Room ask, how far have we come? Joining me in the studio this morning are Duncan MP, best-selling author, and Claire Hazelwood, Respect Aid spokeswoman and campaigner. Duncan Moore, in your recently published book, The Golden Poppy, you claim that the government's decision to introduce this legislation was both necessary and gracious. But how successful has it been?
Well, put it this way, Charlie. By the end of the noughties, Britain was bursting at the seams. The baby boom generation were just achieving retirement age and putting unbelievable pressure on the NHS, and with open borders and healthy mothers contributing to increased rates of immigration and birth, the government felt that it had absolutely no choice but to take drastic measures to save the country from collapse. With today's figures boasting a 95% reduction in overpopulation, we feel we made the right decision.
Well, certainly the level of support the policy received at the time, as it was in many ways revolutionary and extreme, was quite remarkable. But how did you feel when you stepped up to the podium to announce your vision? Were you at all apprehensive that you or your government would be met with contempt?
Well, drastic times require drastic measures, Charlie. It was not our intention to insult the British public's intelligence. They knew that their government was actually betraying them, and they knew that the country had gone to rack and ruin. But they also knew that when they voted for us, that there was still hope for recovery. We are a proud nation, and we know how to pull together. Our will to overcome is there in our psyche. We are a united kingdom, and that's what makes Britain great. The nation was ready to fight, and our legislation provided the tools.
Well, that said, you do discuss later on in your book how the policy came up against opposition from human rights groups who claimed that the policy was unethical and who had a particular aversion to the fact that transfer became compulsory when the subject became 75. OK, I think we'll leave you now for the moment, Mr. Moore, and move on to Claire Hazelwood, whose grandmother fronted one of these groups, I believe, and you want to continue her plight 10 years down the line?
Yes, indeed. My grandmother founded Respect Aid in direct response to this policy. Now, she believed, as my team and I continue to believe, that everyone, irrespective of their age, their race, their class, deserves to be treated fairly and with respect. The right to live or die should and must remain our own. Not our children's, not our neighbours', and certainly not our government's.
If I may interject, the point Miss Hazelwood raises was a key concern in our vision in 2010 and was clearly explained in our press conferences and information pamphlets at the time.
But this is exactly the problem. You send out all these broadcasts and banners and bits of paper as if you're giving the elderly some kind of choice, as if they have some control over what happens to them. These people deserve to live, but you're not content in just taking away that privilege. Oh no, you've got to make them say it was their decision too.
This is not a George Orwell novel. This is reality. Now, if I could return to my previous point, I'd just like to reiterate what we addressed when we first introduced our policy 10 years ago, and that is that this is all about preserving the right to live. Not only to live, but to live life to the full and in full harmony with those around us. When the millions who voted for us did so, they didn't do it out of some kind of fear for a fascist tyranny, but because they believed in the importance of the quality of life.
Well, that's what we all want, isn't it?
But look, now, would you like to share your home with 3 or 4 other families? That's the reality that the voters faced. Now, with our help, they managed to overcome this adversity, and they were able to fight, not only for themselves, but for their children, their future. 2020 vision is just that, a vision for the future.
Duncan, I don't care what you call it, and I don't care how many votes you got in the last election. This is legalised murder, and it's got to stop.
Miss Hazelwood, please, calm down.
I'm sorry, but I just find it incredible that a supposedly visionary British government could turn a blind eye to an entire generation and condemn them to the most undignified and horrific.
Undignified, Miss Hazelwood. Let me ask you this. Is dementia dignified? Is arthritis dignified? Now, before this policy was introduced, my father was suffering from Parkinson's disease, and we used to have to put a napkin around him so that he wouldn't scald himself when he was drinking a cup of tea. Are you trying to tell me that you would have told him that he should continue with this shame just because he had to be dignified? Let me give you another example.
No, let me give you one. My grandmother was a bright, strong, healthy woman, the leader of human rights campaigns for over 35 years. The day after her 75th birthday, she was still very much in her prime. I mean, she was still balancing books and holding meetings. When she got back from her morning jog, there were 2 men waiting for her. They didn't even let her get changed. They dragged her into a car and took her away, and I never saw her again. Dignified. Mr. Moore, I don't call that dignified, I call it disgusting.
Duncan?
Well, sad to say, Miss Hazelwood, none of us can predict the future. Now, only last month I was at a local hospital in Surrey, and there I met a number of boys and girls who were dying from cancer. I spoke to one of them, and he said, I was playing football in the park only a few weeks ago, and now I can't understand why they won't let me out anymore. Tragedy strikes at the most inopportune moment. And your grandmother, God rest her soul, was probably much closer to death than anyone could have realized.
I'm sorry, I can't do this.
Miss Hazelwood,
No.
please. Claire,
I seem to have struck a raw nerve.
would you like to continue, Duncan?
Yes, I'd like to continue with that point I was making. As we have seen, it's very difficult to come to terms with the reality of old age. But it holds no promise other than continuing physical and mental deterioration. What could be more unfair and inhumane than allowing them to endure and struggle for their remaining years? Why not allow them simply to be honoured for their long and fruitful lives? By transferring them to one of our resorts, we can give them the send-off they deserve.
Okay, I think we'll take a break now. When we return, our guests will be discussing your calls and emails, so please don't hesitate to get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Details at the bottom of the screen. See you in 3 minutes. Welcome back to the show. If you've just joined us, I've been discussing the government's 2020 policy with Duncan Moore MP and Claire Hazelwood from the Respect Aid Foundation. Well, during the break, we've been flooded with emails, and I'll just read out a couple now. This one is from Laura Barnes from Chiswick, who writes, my father laid down his life in the war so that I could live in a free world, and at 74, I am honoured to be given the same opportunity for my children and grandchildren. And Steve Barlow from Luton, meanwhile, says, I don't know if Miss Hazelwood was old enough to remember how bad things were in 2010, but she has to understand that this was the best option under the circumstances. It was either this or adopt the Chinese one-child policy. And if that had happened, girls like her would be walking the streets by now. Okay, well, I think there's a caller on line 1. That's Harry Anderson from Dundee, who has a question for you, Mr. Moore. So go ahead, Harry.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, with the kin care fee set so high, don't you think you're discriminating against those families who wish to care for their parents but don't have the financial means to do so? Is it only the wealthy middle class that are allowed to be saved?
Yes, exactly, thank you.
Miss Hazelwood, please, wait your turn.
Now, firstly, as I've already explained, the price of the fee reflects the calculated minimum for independent care. The government cannot be held responsible for any additional costs, and any family members considering the alternative must be prepared to pay for any base-level costs for their parents for their remaining years.
But that's exactly the point. Most people don't have that kind of money. You're reducing human life to mere figures and then not even giving us the chance to pay it back.
Now, please give me the chance to finish my point, Miss Hazelwood. I would like to remind the caller that it's not a matter of being saved or otherwise. It's a matter of dignity. And I'm proud that this nation of ours has managed to avoid the shame of overpopulation. And I, for one, when I reach 75 years of age, whatever happens, will be proud to walk through those doors for myself my children, and my country.
Thank you for your question, Harry. Now I think we have Samantha on the line from Tiverton. Go ahead, Samantha.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'd just like to say congratulations on the success of your book, Mr. Moore. I think it's a fantastic read. I just wanted to ask, my father is trying to decide which of the resorts would be the best for him to transfer to. I've had a look online myself, and I must say the choice is a little overwhelming. Do you have any advice for me?
Yes, that's one of the problems people face, isn't it? There's so much choice. Which option do you actually choose?
Well, we've worked diligently over the years to ensure maximum quality and comfort at each of our resorts, and we are pleased with the consistent positive feedback we've had from the families of those who have been transferred to each of our facilities without exception. Wherever you go, we want you to know that you're in safe hands.
But this is
Well, thank you.
absolutely...
We've run out of time, I'm afraid. So I'd just like to thank everyone who came into the studio this morning. Claire Hazelwood and Duncan Moore. And you for your interest, your calls, your texts and your emails. If you'd like to buy a copy of Duncan's book, The Golden Poppy, you can buy it from the White Room website or any good bookshop. Tomorrow, I'll be asking compulsory boarding. How has it affected our children's education? But until then, from all of us here, good morning and goodbye.